Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Don Stacy. I've been reading from my collection of science fiction stories, Tales of the Bizarre and Unnatural. And the next story is titled The Bargain. A biotech company no one has heard of was slated to bring their latest wonder drug to market, but first they wanted to test it on fully informed and willing subjects. This research project became known as the Underwood Experiment. The Underwood Experiment might be viewed from one angle as an intricate con job, from another as an insidious propaganda, from yet another as a psychological chronicle of a group of people who talked themselves into a complicit lynch mob. Underwood and his team set out to prove that a common criminal could be induced to commit murder. The prototype for this behavior can be seen over and over in the cruel terrors perpetrated by the KKK. Underwood held to the theory that, given a certain set of conditions, a common criminal unlikely to commit an aggressive act can be induced to commit murder. To test his theory, he spoke with dozens of wardens about his research project, and minimum security prisons had abundant numbers of this sort of individual. Finally, he spoke to a warden, Campbell Royce, a man who could be bought, and they released each convict participating in the experiment into Underwood's hands. Would their collective rage and frustration boil over into action? They were transported to a facility Underwood had constructed to his detailed specifications. 50 men were placed in the small open-air prison. They were each supplied a lean-to under which to sleep out of the rain. The 15-foot-high fence around the perimeter was charged with electricity. Under these stark conditions, their food rations were systematically reduced. One day, Underwood himself came to see them. "I have petitioned for the early release of you all. That was part of the bargain you've entered into. Your conditions here will improve, and at some future date you will be released, much sooner than you had anticipated. But we do have a few expectations, and any improvement of your conditions is contingent upon good behavior. That's our first expectation. The second is that you will follow commands. Each command they received required them to commit a crime. The first command of any consequence required them to select one of their own, a man named Geppetto, as it turned out. Geppetto suffered at the hands of his fellow captives for days until he was permitted to be released. He crawled back to his lean-to where he remained and was slowly nursed back to health by one of the other prisoners, a man of slight build who professed to be a Christian. His name was Vale. Later, only Geppetto and Vale were exonerated from charges of conspiracy to commit murder. 2 weeks later, the same Underwood subordinate returned and issued the order once again to select a man for special treatment. This man was beaten even worse than Geppetto. Vale did what he could, gave him water and food, but the man needed hospital care. Just prior to the following morning, he died. This was close to the result Underwood had been seeking when a human rights watchdog group brought this macabre saga to the attention of the New York Times. An extremely private individual, Underwood once avowed he would hang himself if he was somehow forced to live in the crowded confinement of a nursing home. That was a straight-up arrangement he had made with himself, a bargain he would live with. That was the essence of the arrangement. He would forge a new character while he discharged the old one. But life is lived with the passing of each day, and the essential routines are bound by the seasons. Driving or walking from one place to another, from one city into the country, from the noise, pollution of an excavation project to a hushed winter landscape. He would never be able to walk over public land again. He would be sent to prison instead, rather than be kept in a holding cell, a short tunnel's walk to the basement of the courthouse. The life that he had always loved, most of all, was now permanently beyond his reach. He would soon be confined in a prison. What did he know of prisons? But if it was going to be as brutal and bestial as prison literature has portrayed and shown it to be, what could he do? Keep his head down, literally, don't hold another man's gaze for a moment? Would they allow him a pen and writing paper? He would later be astonished to find that these were items which would be smuggled in for a price. Having never married, he led a Spartan existence apart from his duties. Underwood was a man rumored to have millions completely secured in bank accounts. But his duties. These duties were plain duties taught to you as children, determined by which side of the door you're on. Thus, education and a degree of cultivation can throw most people through a series of doors rather quickly. And some doors can never be reopened. The present spirals into the past, and some or perhaps many doors do not open, and soon he would be living shoulder to shoulder with a mob of criminals. He now lived behind locked doors, barred windows. Soon he'd be thrown into the cage with all the others convicted of various crimes. Maybe they would treat him differently. Maybe they would let him be, though he felt some contact was imminent. Underwood may have been prescient in one regard. He was immediately seen as a political prisoner. There were a few others, as he soon found out, at the canteen one day where they all occupied a single table, all three of them. They were all looking at him with open, unthreatening faces. "Sit down with us, Underwood. You belong here," one of them said. Underwood set his tray on the table, then sat down on the bench. He was nervous and nodded at each of them for a moment, looking into their faces with a rueful expression. We're quite the minority here," Underwood said. "It takes a lot to shock these prisoners. Reprisals are sometimes quite ingenious and sadistic. They've all seen it before, cruelties you can't imagine. Are we in danger?" "Not at the moment," the same man again replied. "But you need to make it be known that you can be useful to them. That's your best protection. Can we get a cell phone?" "Not too difficult. Eduardo has it right at the moment." He looked at Eduardo, a tall Latino with a thin, rugged face. "Good," he said. "I can set up business dealings for them in exchange for my personal safety." The other fellow looked at Underwood and spoke for the first time. "They all know you're a rich, important man. They all want to make themselves rich in here at your expense. That's why I'll have to come up with an arrangement they'll be tempted to accept. We're all curious to see what you come up with." "Whatever it is," Underwood said, "I'd better make it snappy. None of that crowd can exercise patience or restraint. That's why they're criminals. So what if we put together a drug smuggling operation? That should keep their attention. And just exactly how would this work? Eduardo said. Let me explain what I have in mind, Underwood said.